James, thanks for coming here today.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Let's just jump right into this here. What are the most significant challenges that you expect to face over the next 12 months?
Yeah, I think the Alberta construction design engineering market is still going to be challenged for growth the next year. So our challenge is really, in a nutshell, marketing and business development, forming partnerships, trying to build our business, respond to what niches there are that are still growing, and kind of all the business cliches that go with trying to chase down those opportunities, take care of our clients to keep those that we have happy, and see how we can't still manage to grow even in tough times.
Which niches are you finding are kind of the most challenging for you?
Most challenging? That's a really good question. We're finding that there's still a lingering glut of multifamily on the market, so trying to work with our clients there to be fiscally responsible with their dollars on the design. One of the areas that we've been specializing in has been cannabis production, and as that market has grown, trying to find ways to do that and expedite things faster so our clients can hit the market sooner. A lot of our public sector clients are similarly constrained for dollars, so trying to find a way to be responsible with their design dollars and their long-term operating costs are kind of some primary challenges that we're faced with. Right,
you mentioned cannabis, and it leads us into our next question here. Where do you see the most ideal opportunities over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah. I think that Alberta is very well positioned on the cannabis side, and we're as busy as ever designing those types of facilities, but it's been a shift. For the past 3 years, we've been designing flowering facilities for the recreation market that's legal today, but the next and even larger market is going to be edibles and beverages and the like, and Alberta is known for agri-food. We're developing a solid reputation for being reliable producers of cannabis, and being able to bring those two together and be along for the journey with our clients, I think, is going to be an interesting market that we'll see develop in the next few years.
Who knows what the future holds with that, right?
Yeah.
It's been a bit of a whirlwind here the last 12 months leading up to this.
Absolutely. Never expected that we'd have a sizable chunk of our practice dedicated to that 3 years ago, but we've been fortunate to get on board with some long-standing early producers and develop relationships from there.
Awesome. So then, as you look ahead to the evolution of Calgary, what urbanization and development trends do you see kind of evolving over the next decade?
I think that the ongoing trend to density, to mixed use and transit-oriented development is going to be an ongoing trend there. That's where we see the towers that we're doing at this point are built around C-train or bus rapid transit stations, and trying to densify the just outside of the inner city and the suburbs. I think that's going to be kind of one of those major trends that we're going to see. The other one that I'd say will be the ongoing progression of our energy codes and the journey towards net zero, and how communities can help with that at the same time.
So then, have you been following along with some of the progress on the Green Line and where that is headed into the next couple of years, the next 5 years or so on?
Yeah, for sure. We're not anticipating being majorly involved in that from a practice perspective, but what we are finding is a number of developers that we're working with are anticipating where the next wave of growth will be in relation to where those stations are, and starting to make smart choices around retail, around multifamily, so that they're ready to serve those nodes when it does come online.
Nice. So if we expand our frame of reference here to nationally, what urbanization and development trends do you see for the nation over the next decade?
I would say, again, the ongoing push towards a low carbon economy impacting how we design our neighborhoods and our buildings. One wild card that's out there that's starting to be talked about is whether we should be designing parking structures in our buildings any longer. If smart electric vehicles, driverless vehicles are going to be the norm, the argument would go, nobody's going to own a car, they're going to lease it. And what also then do you do with that vast volume of space below your feet and above in some cases? Can that be repurposed into something more useful?
That's a very interesting thought. I would be interested if you can pull the steering wheel out of some people's hands. I know a lot of people love to drive. I myself like to drive, but
we have a semi-autonomous car, a Volvo right now, and I love it in gridlock because it does the driving for me. but as soon as the road opens up, I'm taking back control.
Taking it back. Nice. I like that. I like that a lot. So then, speaking of driverless cars then, which new technology or trend in the building industry do you think will become a game changer?
Really good question. I think on the technology side, I would say it's a mode of delivering buildings, and I think we're going to see an ongoing emphasis on modular construction. We're kind of the last design engineering industry in the world. You look at how blenders, aircraft, trains, cars, just about anything else is built. And yes, we're not exactly the same because every building is kind of bespoke in some aspects. But there's an awful lot that are within those buildings that could be modularized.
Right.
And we're starting to see builders actually drive that trend as a differentiator for them. The other thing that I think is going to be a big changer is lean in our methodology in terms of how we approach that. I mean that in terms of the Toyota production system and looking at things not in terms of trying to be cheap and cheerful with things, but trying to specifically stitch together the design and the construction and the supplier industry and make it a lot more closely knit and less adversarial than I think it is today.
Absolutely, absolutely. So then on the heels of the new technology comes a new generation. What advice would you have for the upcomers looking to maybe get into the industry or that are just getting into the industry themselves right now?
Yeah. When I look back on my career, I was always very well served by being curious, asking lots of really good questions, anticipating what your boss and your clients want before they do, hopefully, and also treating everybody like a client. That means your desk mate next to you, if you're in an interdisciplinary house, looking at what the other designers on your team need and trying to anticipate that. So being a team player.
Treat others as you'd like to be treated, right?
Absolutely.
It's simple, but it applies in all things, it seems like. So then for yourself, when you kind of look back and take into stock everything you've done over your career, what would be the best project that you've worked on or the most memorable?
Yeah, so this is one that until recently I've said it's probably a once in a lifetime, but I'm hoping to break that trend. It was the Richmond Olympic Oval.
Oh, okay.
So I was fortunate enough to work on most of the 2010 Winter Game venues as a designer and sustainability consultant, and here Calgary is looking at it again. But the Richmond Olympic Oval was probably the most unique, not only because it was groundbreaking in terms of how we presented the design under the timeline constraints that we had for the organizing committee, but also how the building was able to be reconfigured rapidly for a legacy mode. Because everybody thinks here's what it has to do during the games, but it was designed by a very smart group of people to be useful to the people of Richmond after the fact. So to me, that was the highlight of it. Though I was very nervous watching the speed skating events, making sure that
No kidding.
nobody's complaining and blaming the ice
No
quality
kidding.
in the air for what was going on in there.
Oh, so then with that and with just conveniently the Olympic 2026 bid here is potentially coming down the pipe. What kind of an impact do you think that would have on the industry and the community as a whole if we were to get that bid?
So I'll declare I have a bias because I have skin in the game with that, but I think it would be great for the construction industry in particular. There are a lot of very talented architects, engineers, builders of every trade and stripe out there that are really struggling. So I think a program like that would put a lot of underemployed people to good use and be a good use of Alberta's talents in that respect. And I think it would be a good moral boost to Calgary because it's been a few years of tough slogs. Calgarians don't like to complain. That's not our way of doing things. But I think it would be a real improvement and a blessing for us.
Absolutely, I'm with you there. So then, kind of moving along here, out of the many economic differentiators emerging, which one do you think we should all be focusing our efforts on? Which is going to be the one to kind of come out on top?
Yeah. So I go back to, again, I think cannabis in that in Alberta, if I centralize it, we have a really strong reputation on the agri-food side of things. We're developing a really strong and renowned reputation, even globally, for some of the product that's being produced there. And I think the best is yet to come in terms of how that market comes in terms of edibles and the like. We have the financial people, the mergers and acquisition people, the legal people, the designers, the constructors, and the growers, the farmers even, and the agri-food production pieces to make that go. So I think that'll be an interesting market that could be world-class for us. And, early adopter rules apply there for Canada, and starting to get calls and questions from other nations as they may look to do that. So I think that's something that we might find ourselves in high demand for in future years.
And who knows what's going to spill off as we're just getting this is so new. We just
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're starting to get requests related to cucumbers and strawberries and tomatoes for it now. So towards the urban farming side of things. So who knows, that might be a good use for underutilized downtown Calgary office towers in the near future as well.
Oh, well, it's a new world we're living in. Awesome,
Yeah.
James. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
having
much.
you today.
Cheers.
Take care.